Welcome to this presentation of fraud detection using sequence data visualizations with clear intelligence. I'm your host, Will Strauss. Special thank you to those who watched our previous video on the definition and scope of occupational fraud. Now let's get started in this use case. Company X sells toilet paper. One of the keys to their success of this toilet paper business is their business-to-business agents. They track a list of business customers, proactively reach out to them based on previous buying patterns, and offer additional items to help grow the market basket. If the agent can contact a customer and influence a sale, they log the order number into a tracking system and then are paid out a commission provided they meet some minimum sales quotas. You're contacted because the sales manager of that team has done an audit on the total sales and commissions paid and realizes there's a gap. So you have two choices: listen to thousands of calls along with each agent's commission log to find irregularities based on suspicions that could be biased by the sales manager, or try to find the key in the data. So we're going to start with the data. As you see here, well, let's zoom in and see this a little clearer. There we go. There's not much to this data. There's an order number, the created date of that order, name of the agent who logged it, the process stage each order is in, and the total basket value. Now, this is fantastic data for KPI reporting. It's extremely clean, tens of thousands of records, but there's less than 0.5% nulls. And for the record, I did replace the 10-digit employee code with more amusing names. I clarify that because I don't want any of our younger viewers to think that Rosie the Riveter was a toilet paper sales agent. Wow. This data structure is ideal for supporting traditional BizVises and executive audit type views. The beauty of this data is that it allows us to visualize the gap between time in the real world and call center time. Let's expand on that. Does the data you work with have the same characteristic? How do you measure time in your data? Are you thinking of something like this, like hours, minutes, calendar days, fiscal days, maybe solar days? You're trying to get deeper. Time is infinite and also non-existent. And you're probably wondering what the heck this has to do with fraud. If you watch the first part of this series, you may recall us stressing that the underlying need for active and evolving fraud detection methods is supported by these maxims. The longer a fraud scheme lasts, the more it costs. The passing of time is self-evident in the definition of behavior. Therefore, you must allow yourself to explore how time is kept in your data beyond the date timestamps. Here's some non-date data points that we can use to track time. The concept we're exploring here is sequencing. Things like check numbers, order numbers, punch card records, auto-generated employee IDs. These are generally sequenced numbers that are spit out by an auto-generating system. Now, they're not always sequential, so you need a test to see if these are valuable fields that you can use to explore time. Here's that test. We'll take that same data that we had, and we're going to create a random reference date. You want to make sure it's something that's not going to be included in your data record. So for this case, I use June 1st, 1900. Second is create a date diff or date difference calculation to find the difference between the order date that's in your data and that reference date that you created. Lastly, we're going to build a simple shape chart. So just drag that created date onto columns and make sure it's set to the exact date. And then on rows, put the order number and sort the order number ascending in alphabetical order. So if these numbers are sequential and you have them sorted that way, they should line up. Drag that date difference calculation that we made right onto color. So if your data comes out looking like this, where you have an inclined plane or declined plane, and most of your marks are centered along that plane, and your date difference using that reference date, the color range follows either left to right or right to left, going along with that plane, you know that the underlying number that you're dealing with is truly sequential and should tie to a real date. So our order numbers are spit out sequentially, and they infer the date in which they happened. We're going to explore that a little bit quicker. So now that we have a basis for our visualization and understanding of how we're going to manipulate time, we need to go back to the real world. So we asked the sales manager, if you were going to have the CEO of company X come to the call center and sit with an agent to listen to calls, who would you pick? Who's by far your best associate? Without hesitation, the manager says Rosie. Rosie is our most diligent worker and has the most positive feedback from her customers. If we look at this fraud sequencing viz highlighting Rosie, we can see she is simply amazing. You can follow my mouse here. What we're looking at are these series of 5 hash marks of stacked marks with a pretty regular gap in between them, where the last mark in a series of 5 always lines up with the first mark in the next series of 5. What we're looking at is a work week. These are series of order numbers being logged by Rosie Monday through Friday with a gap for the weekend. The only times that we see larger gaps, as we do up here, they're usually followed or preceded by Spire. So she's either getting ahead of or catching up from time off. Maybe it was sick time, it was vacation time. But we now have a really good understanding of what this data should look like as we look at other agents. Another key part of this as we're humanizing the data, we do not ask the sales manager who they suspect. There are all various kinds of biases that can come out that we don't want to have to deal with and dissect with. People are very honest and forthcoming when it comes to who their best is, particularly in fraud detection scenarios, or something's off. It's a little easier for them to say who the best person is. Now that best person might also be conducting fraud, which is why their records look so good, but we're going to trust that Rosie's great. Modeling from Rosie, we can find outliers that tell us how those losses may be occurring in different ways. There's a big difference between fraud and inefficiency. They both cost you towards your bottom line, but the motivation for the underlying behavior and the methodologies themselves are clearly different. Deadline Debbie, down in the bottom right corner, is stealing time through what appears to be some just terrible record keeping. Instead of logging each call as they happen, or perhaps slacking off until the quotas are due, the logged orders form these tall spires. And the weekly records are much more sparse than what we see with Rosie. So what we can infer is that she's entering records for an entire month in 1 or 2 days. This is extremely inefficient and should be corrected, and can account for some of the gap that was found in the audit between the sales records, because there's a much higher chance of error when trying to enter in your records that way. Bonnie's records look slightly different. Her calls follow a more regular pattern, just like Rosie, but the outliers are more frequent. These are a little faint to see, but as I kind of move my mouse around, you could see that really regularly there's calls that are separated away from that plane. It doesn't have that catch-up feel that we have with Debbie. It also is not perfectly uniform like Rosie. From tens of thousands of records, we're able to isolate around 50 orders and calls that the sales manager can audit. So we just lasso these groups here. We offered the sales manager a list of those order numbers. They're then able to go back and listen to the calls with those order numbers, see if they were legit. In this particular real world case, the result was that more than 80% of the order numbers that we pulled from the 50 outliers had no customer call recording. What was happening is to stay ahead of her quotas and gain more commission, If Bonnie could not contact a customer after a few attempts, she'd open up their account, log the last order the customer made for themselves as influenced by her. Therefore, the outliers appear to jump from the pattern. By the order number sequencing, they should have been placed days or weeks earlier than what the timestamp in the log data is actually indicating. This is just one approach to active and evolving fraud detection analytics disciplines we teach as part of our services at ClearIntelligence. To find out more about our expertise, our services, and how we can help you mitigate losses from fraud before it's too late, visit us at clearintelligence.com or reach out to me at william.strauss@clearintelligence.com. Again, thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you.